Elias opened his eyes to a ceiling that did not look like any hospital he had ever seen. It was smooth and pale, like the inside of a pearl, with thin lines that curved gently across it. The light did not come from lamps. It seemed to come from the ceiling itself, soft and even, never too bright, never too dark. For a long moment, he lay still, trying to understand whether he was awake or dreaming. He tried to move his hands. They felt heavy, but not in a painful way. More like someone had wrapped warm blankets around his arms. He blinked again, and the room sharpened into focus. A clear panel curved around the bed like a protective shell. Beyond it, shadowy figures moved quietly. Their shapes were tall and slender, not human. The way they moved was careful, controlled, almost too perfect. Elias swallowed. His throat was dry, yet he could breathe easily. He listened for the familiar beeps of human machines. Instead, he heard a low humming sound, steady like a distant engine. The air smelled clean, almost like rain after dust. He took a slow breath, then another. His body felt strange, lighter than it should have felt after what he remembered. What did he remember? Fragments came like broken glass. A dark sky full of stars. A shaking corridor, a warning voice. Heat, bright and sudden, and then the sharp feeling of falling. Not falling through air, but falling away from control. Then silence. He tried to sit up. The panel around the bed responded immediately, sliding open without a sound. Elias froze, surprised. The movement was smooth, like the room itself had been waiting for him to wake. A tall figure stepped closer. The being wore a pale uniform that looked grown rather than stitched. Its face was narrow, with high cheekbones and large eyes that reflected the room's light like polished stone. Elias could not read its expression, but he could feel its attention on him, sharp and focused. The figure spoke in a language Elias did not understand. The sound was soft and rhythmic, like water over small stones. Another figure joined it, holding a flat device that displayed shifting symbols. Elias's heart beat faster. He was not on Earth. He was not even with humans. Elias forced himself to stay calm. Panic would not help. If he was alive, then something had chosen to keep him alive. That meant there was a chance to learn, to adapt, to survive. He looked around the room more carefully. It was clean, almost empty, but not sterile in the way human hospitals were. The surfaces felt warm, not cold. The walls curved gently, creating a sense of safety instead of harsh corners. In one section, a set of instruments floated in place, held by invisible force. They rotated slowly, as if awaiting instructions. The tall figure stepped closer again. Elias noticed a small band around his wrist, thin as a thread. It pulsed with faint light. He lifted his arm to examine it, and the band tightened slightly, as if confirming he was awake. The alien spoke again, then tilted its head. It seemed to be waiting for Elias to respond. Elias chose simple words. I am human, he said slowly. My name is Elias. The alien's eyes narrowed slightly, perhaps focusing on the sounds. It made a short gesture with its long fingers. The device in its hand changed, symbols rearranging. The alien tried a sound that was not quite right, then tried again. As, it said, as if tasting the name. Elias nodded. Yes. Another figure moved behind the first, watching. Elias noticed how quiet they were. No nervous shifts, no rushed movements. They behaved like a team that had done this many times, confident in their control of every detail. Elias tried again. Where am I? The first alien did not answer directly. It turned and tapped the floating instruments. A thin thread of light extended from one instrument and touched Elias's chest, passing through his skin without pain. Elias felt a mild warmth, like sunlight through clothing. The alien studied the readings on its device. Elias waited, breathing slowly. He could feel his pulse. Strong. Steady. That did not match what he remembered about the battle. He should have been barely alive, if alive at all. A new voice entered the room. Softer. Slower. It carried a different tone, like someone trying to be careful, not just accurate. Elias turned his head and saw her. She was a young, beautiful alien woman, taller than most humans, but not as tall as the others. Her uniform was a deeper shade, and around her neck was a band that shimmered with faint patterns. Her eyes were wide, expressive in a way the others' eyes were not. She hesitated at the entrance, as if unsure whether she should step closer. Then she did. She moved toward Elias with measured steps, holding a small container that released a gentle mist. She paused near his bed and looked at him. There was something in her face that Elias recognized, even across species: worry. She leaned slightly forward, and when she spoke, the words came out in broken but understandable English, like she had practiced them many times. "You? Awake?" she said. Her voice was quiet. "Good." Elias stared at her, surprised by the language. "You speak English?" She swallowed, then added, "Learning." The other aliens looked at her, then at Elias, as if her role was special. Elias noticed the way she held herself. Not stiff, not cold. Her hands were steady, but her eyes were not. They kept flicking to the monitor-like symbols around his bed. He pointed gently at himself. "Why am I here?" She hesitated. She seemed to search for the right words. "Medical station," she said. "You were found?" "Found where?" Elias asked. She glanced at the tall alien with the device as if checking whether she was allowed to answer. That alien made a small gesture, neither approving nor disapproving, more like permission with limits. The young nurse looked back at Elias. "Near conflict zone," she said. "Your ship damaged." Elias's memory sharpened. The battle had been chaotic. His unit had been protecting a convoy. They had been outnumbered. He remembered making a choice. A risky one. Something about drawing attention away. Then heat, brightness, and the feeling of the floor disappearing. He pressed his lips together. "My crew?" The nurse's face tightened. She seemed to understand the question. But the answer was not simple. "I don't know," she said quietly. "I only medical." That was not reassuring, but it was honest. Elias looked down at his own body. He expected bandages, scars, pain. Instead, he saw smooth skin and faint lines of light beneath it, like tiny rivers. The lines pulsed gently when he breathed. He lifted his hand and watched the light respond, as if his body was connected to the machines around him. "What did you do to me?" he asked, careful not to sound accusing. The nurse's eyes widened. "Save," she said. "Keep you alive. Keep you alive." Elias felt a small chill, even in the warm room. Those words implied something else, something temporary, something fragile. The tall alien stepped forward again and spoke quickly in its own language. The nurse listened, then nodded. She turned back to Elias. "They say you are rare," she told him. "Human body. Different. Hard to repair." Elias tried to keep his voice steady. "But you repaired it?" The nurse looked down at the container in her hands. "Not fully," she whispered. The room grew quieter. The humming seemed louder now, like the station itself was listening. Elias took another breath. He decided to test the limits of what they would tell him. "Are you holding me prisoner?" The tall alien's head tilted, and it spoke again. The nurse listened, then answered. "No," she said. "You are patient." "But also important." "Important how?" Elias asked. The nurse took a slow breath. She looked at him with an expression that felt almost human. "Because you are human," she said. "And because you did something Elias frowned." "What did I do?" She did not answer directly. Instead, she stepped closer and released a little mist from the container. The mist smelled faintly sweet, and when Elias inhaled it, his mind cleared slightly, like someone had wiped fog from a window. "You rest," she said. "Talk later." Elias shook his head gently. "Now, I need to know. Where am I? Oh, who are you? Why is everyone watching me?" She looked torn. She glanced at the other aliens again. They seemed to be observing, not reacting, like scientists watching a test. "My name?" She paused and then spoke carefully. "Sio." Elias nodded. "Siel, I'm Elias." She repeated his name again, more confidently this time. Elias. That small effort made Elias feel something he did not expect. Gratitude. "How long have I been here?" he asked. Sael looked toward the floating display and back at him. "Time different," she said slowly. "But for you, maybe 2 days." 2 days. Elias tried to connect that with his last memory. It felt both short and impossible. He had expected to wake up on a human ship, surrounded by his own people. Instead, he was in an alien medical station, with beings who treated him like a rare puzzle. He moved his legs slightly under the sheet-like material covering him. They responded without pain. That should have made him relieved, but it made him uneasy instead. Healing that fast did not happen in human medicine. He lowered his voice. "Siel, are you afraid?" Siel's eyes flicked to the side. "No," she said too quickly. Elias watched her closely. He had learned in training that people who lied often gave themselves away through small details. Her hands were steady, but her breathing was not. Her eyes kept returning to the same line on his monitor. "Then why do you keep looking there?" he asked. Saw froze. For a moment, she looked like she wanted to step back, to hide behind the calm professionals, but she stayed. "I check," she said. "Always check." Elias followed her gaze. The symbols meant nothing to him, but he could see patterns. Some lines were stable, others shifted slightly. One symbol flashed at intervals, a warning sign, perhaps. Elias looked back at her. "What does it say?" Sile swallowed. Her eyes glistened under the soft ceiling light. Elias realized something then, something important. She was not just worried. She was holding something heavy inside, something she did not want to carry alone. He lowered his voice even more. "Sael, tell me the truth." She held his gaze. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The other aliens seemed to wait in silence, not interfering. It was as if they were curious to see what would happen. Sael leaned closer, close enough that her voice became almost a breath. "You are..." She paused, searching for the word. "You are going away." Elias frowned. "Going away." She squeezed her eyes shut for a second, then opened them again. "Dying," she whispered. The word hit Elias like a sudden drop in temperature. Not because he was shocked by the idea. Soldiers lived with that idea every day. But because he had not expected to hear it spoken so plainly in this calm, clean room. He stared at Sael. She looked as if she had just broken a rule by saying it. Her lips trembled slightly. Elias's first instinct was to deny it. He felt strong. He could move. He could breathe. His heartbeat was steady, but training had taught him that the body could be held together by hope and adrenaline, even when the damage underneath was real. He forced himself to stay calm.
"How long?" he asked. Sael flinched. as if the question hurt.
I don't know exact, she whispered. Machines.
Keep you stable, but inside.
Your cells failing. Elias took a slow breath. Elias is coming down to him. He looked down at the faint, light lines under his skin. They were not just healing marks. They were support. Artificial support. So I'm a walking machine, he said quietly. Sail shook her head quickly. You are you, she said. So, her voice grew stronger, more certain. Human mind. Strong. Human spirit. Strong. Elias almost smiled at the word spirit. It sounded like something she had learned from human stories or translations. He watched her carefully.
Why are you crying then? He asked. Sail's eyes filled more.
Because, she struggled with English, but the meaning came through. Because you are not number, not experiment. You speak. You look at me like I am real. And they. She glanced at the others. They look at you like mystery. Elias understood then. Sael was caught between her training and her heart. Between duty and empathy, and somehow, the human in her bed had become the reason she could no longer pretend emotions did not matter. Elias reached out slowly. He did not want to scare her. He placed his hand near hers, not touching, offering a choice. After a brief pause, Sael placed her fingers gently against his. Her skin was warmer than he expected. Her touch was light, careful, as if he might break. Elias held her gaze. Thank you for telling me, he said. Sael shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks in a way that looked almost identical to humans. I should not, she whispered, but I can't watch alone. Elias nodded. You don't have to watch alone. Behind Sael, the tall alien spoke sharply. Buh. Sael's shoulders stiffened. She drew back slightly, wiping her face quickly. The calm professional mask returned, but it did not fit as well now. She turned to the tall alien and responded in their language. Elias could not understand the words, but he could understand the tone. Sael sounded defensive, maybe even angry. The tall alien replied, cold and controlled, then gestured toward Elias's monitors. Sael looked back at Elias, her eyes apologizing for everything she could not say. They will move you soon, she said softly. More tests. Elias's jaw tightened. Tests? I'm dying? And they want tests? Sael looked down. They want to learn, she said. They think knowledge is most important. Elias stared at the ceiling. He felt anger rising, but he pushed it down. Anger was useful only when it had direction. He looked back at Sael. Do they want to help me? Or do they want to study me? Sael's silence was answer enough. Elias took another deep breath. In his mind, the battle returned like a distant echo. He remembered the choice he had made. He remembered trying to protect others. If he was dying now, then at least his choice had meant something. Still, he was not ready to accept becoming a silent lesson on a table. He looked at Sael carefully. Is there any chance? He asked. Any treatment? Sael's eyes flickered with something like hope and fear mixed together. There are ideas, she whispered, but not aloud. Elias nodded slowly. Then maybe we don't ask permission, he said, not as a threat, but as a calm fact. Sael stared at him, shocked. You would risk? Elias's expression stayed steady. I've been risking my whole life, he said, but I don't risk for nothing. I risk for purpose. Sale's breath caught. She seemed to understand something important about humans in that moment. Not that they were fearless, but that they could choose courage even when fear was real. The tall alien stepped forward again, and Sale straightened, becoming professional once more. She turned to Elias and spoke quietly, with careful control. You must rest, she said. Please. If you push, your body falls faster. Elias nodded. I'll rest, he said. But Sael, don't disappear. Sael hesitated, then gave a small, almost invisible nod. I come back, she promised. The panel around the bed slid partially closed again, not trapping him, but guiding him back into a safe position. The humming sound deepened, and the faint light lines under his skin pulsed more slowly, as if the machines were easing him into sleep. Elias kept his eyes on Saol as long as he could. She stood near the doorway, surrounded by quiet aliens who did not understand why her eyes were wet. Before his vision blurred, he saw Saol glance back at him one last time. Her expression was not just sadness. It was determination, like someone who had just decided that rules were not always right. Elias let the darkness take him, not as surrender, but as preparation. Somewhere beyond the smooth walls of the medical station, a larger conflict waited, and inside this quiet room, a different kind of battle had begun. One fought with truth, willpower, and the strange connection between a human who refused to fade quietly and an alien nurse who could no longer pretend that emotions were weakness. Elias drifted between sleep and awareness, never fully certain how much time had passed. The strange warmth inside his body felt steady, like a gentle current carrying him forward. When he finally opened his eyes again, the ceiling above him looked the same, calm and soft. But something in the room had changed. The air felt heavier, filled with tension he could not see but could sense. The curved panel around his bed remained half open. Beyond it, more alien figures moved than before. They spoke in low tones, their voices blending into a quiet rhythm that felt serious. Elias stayed still and watched. He had learned long ago that observation could reveal more than questions. His body felt weaker than before. The strength he had felt earlier was fading, replaced by a subtle heaviness in his chest and arms. It did not hurt, but it made him aware that the machines were doing much of the work for him. The faint lines of light under his skin pulsed slower now. He turned his head slightly, searching for one familiar face. Sael stood near a floating display, her posture tense. She looked different today, more careful, more guarded. When she noticed him watching, her expression softened, and she stepped toward him. You awake again, she said quietly. Elias nodded. Still here. She gave a small smile at that, though sadness lingered in her eyes. Yes? Still here? He studied her for a moment. You didn't disappear, he said. I said, I come back, she replied. The way she said it made it sound like a promise she had chosen to keep despite pressure. Elias took a slow breath. What changed? He asked. Everyone looks serious. Sail hesitated. She glanced behind her, checking if anyone was listening closely. Council knows you awake longer, she said carefully. They discuss next steps. Next steps? Elias repeated. That sounds like bad news. She did not answer immediately. Which told him enough. Elias shifted slightly, and the movement caused a wave of weakness to pass through him. He clenched his jaw until it faded. Sael noticed and stepped closer, adjusting something on the floating interface. The humming sound around him deepened, and warmth spread through his chest. Better? She asked. Enough, he said. She studied his face. You try to hide pain, she said softly. Not hiding, he replied. Just managing. Humans say many things like that, she said. Elias gave a faint smile. You've been studying us. Yes, she admitted. You are confusing. Most humans would agree, he said. For a moment, the mood lightened, but it did not last long. Elias noticed a tall alien watching from across the room. The being's posture was stiff, its attention focused entirely on him and Sail. He felt like an object under examination. He lowered his voice. They don't like you talking to me too much, do they? Sail followed his gaze, then looked back at him. They think emotional attachment reduces efficiency, she said carefully. And you disagree? She hesitated, then nodded slightly. Elias studied her. You said I'm dying, he reminded her gently. So why do they care what I think or feel? Because your brain activity is unusual, she said. Even when body weakens, mind stays strong. They want to understand. So I'm still an experiment, Elias said quietly.
No,
She said quickly, then paused.
not only experiment.
Elias watched her struggle with the words. He understood she was trying to protect him from the harsher truth. He changed the subject slightly. Do they know you told me? No. They believe you do not understand full condition yet. He nodded slowly. Then we should keep it that way for now. You want pretend? Not pretend, he corrected gently. Just choose when to talk about certain things.
Sael seemed surprised by his calmness. You are not afraid? She asked.
Elias looked toward the ceiling. Of dying? Everyone is, a little. But fear doesn't change facts. What matters is what you do with the time you have. She watched him carefully, as if trying to memorize every word. After a moment, she said quietly, Many species avoid talking about end of life. Humans talk openly. We try, he said. Doesn't mean we're always brave about it. A group of aliens approached then, their movements precise. The tall one who had been watching stepped forward. Sael straightened immediately, her professional mask returning. The alien spoke rapidly, its tone firm. Sael translated slowly. They want to move you to advanced scan chamber. Elias nodded. Am I allowed to say no? She hesitated. Technically, yes, but they will insist strongly. He considered that. Refusing now might reduce his chances of learning more. Then let's go, he said. The bed shifted under him, lifting smoothly from the floor. The movement was silent, controlled by invisible mechanisms. Elias felt like he was floating as the bed glided through a wide corridor. The station outside his room was larger than he expected. Transparent walls revealed distant chambers, filled with glowing structures. Strange plants grew in tall columns, their leaves moving slowly as if sensing air currents. Other aliens passed by, some pausing to look at him with curiosity. Elias noticed something else too. Security drones followed at a distance, hovering quietly. He felt like an important guest, or a valuable object. They entered a circular chamber, filled with rings of light. The bed lowered into the center. Devices adjusted themselves around him, scanning without touching. Sael stayed near his side, watching every reading carefully. The tall alien gave instructions. The rings began to rotate slowly, creating waves of gentle pressure across Elias's body. He felt warmth, then cold, then warmth again. His vision blurred for a moment, memories flickered, flashes of the battle, voices calling his name, the feeling of choosing to stay behind while others escaped. He clenched his teeth as the images passed. "Focus on breathing," Sale said softly. "Procedure safe." "I trust you," he said quietly. She blinked at that, surprised. The scanning continued for several minutes. The machines emitted soft tones that changed with each new reading. Finally, the rings slowed and lifted away. The tall alien studied the results, then spoke sharply. Other aliens gathered around, analyzing the data with intense focus. Sahel watched their reactions carefully. Elias could see tension growing in her shoulders. "What does it say?" he asked. She hesitated. "Your body continues to decline," she said quietly. "But brain adapting, creating new patterns they have not seen before. Good or bad?" he asked. She struggled to answer. "Unknown," she said finally. The tall alien turned toward her and spoke again. This time the tone sounded almost urgent. Sale's eyes widened as she listened. She turned back to Elias slowly. "They want to transfer you to Research Wing," she said. "Research Wing?" Elias repeated. "That doesn't sound like recovery."
No, she admitted. He felt a spark of anger, but he controlled it.
"And you?" he asked. "Will you still be my nurse?" She hesitated. "I don't know." Elias nodded slowly. "Then we need to figure something out." Her eyes met his. He could see fear there, but also determination. As they moved him back toward the medical ward, Elias thought carefully. He had little physical strength, but his mind remained clear. That was something. And he had Sayal, someone willing to question the system. Back in his room, Sayal adjusted the machines around him with quiet focus. "You should rest now," she said softly. He watched her for a long moment. "Sayal, earlier you said there were ideas, treatments not allowed." She froze slightly. "I should not discuss. I'm not asking you to break rules right now," he said calmly. "Just tell me if there is hope." She looked at him, her expression full of conflict. Finally, she whispered, "There is experimental therapy. High risk, unknown outcome. Council forbids, because not proven." Elias nodded slowly. "But you think it might work?" She did not answer directly. Instead, she said, "Humans survive things other species cannot." He smiled faintly. "That sounds like hope." Her eyes softened. "Maybe." Silence filled the room for a while. The steady humming felt almost comforting. Elias closed his eyes briefly, gathering strength. When he opened them again, he spoke quietly. "Sael, if I become only research subject, promise me something." "What?" she asked. "Don't let them forget I'm a person." Her throat tightened. "I promise," she whispered. Outside the room, distant footsteps echoed. Voices spoke quickly in alien language, urgency rising. Sael looked toward the door, worry returning. "They come soon," she said. "Decision made." Elias nodded slowly. He felt the weight of time pressing down on him, but instead of fear, he felt focus. He reached out again, placing his hand near hers. She touched his fingers gently. "Whatever happens," he said, "we keep choosing. That's what humans do." She looked at him with deep emotion. "And maybe what my people need to learn," she said softly. The door began to open and shadows of the council members filled the entrance. Elias took a slow breath, preparing himself. The next phase of his fight had begun, not with weapons or battleships, but with decisions that would decide whether he lived as a person or became only a lesson for others. The door opened slowly, and several members of the alien council entered the room. Their movements were calm and precise, but there was a sense of urgency behind their stillness. Elias watched them carefully, trying to read their expressions even though their faces were unfamiliar. He had learned to observe body language during his years as a soldier, and even across species, he could feel the difference between curiosity and authority. Sail stepped slightly forward, placing herself closer to Elias without making it obvious. Her hands remained steady, but he noticed the tension in her shoulders. She was preparing herself for something difficult. One of the taller council members moved toward the bed. Its eyes were deep and reflective, almost like dark glass. It spoke in a controlled tone. Sael listened carefully and then turned to Elias. "They say transfer begins soon," she translated quietly. "Research Division wants continuous observation." Elias nodded slowly. He had expected this. "And, medical treatment?" he asked. Sael hesitated before answering. "Support only," she said. "No new therapy approved." He felt a heavy weight settle inside his chest, not from fear, but from understanding. The council saw him as valuable knowledge, not as someone to save. The alien council member continued speaking. Sayol translated again. "They want consent from you. They say cooperation helps future understanding between species." Elias almost smiled at the careful wording. "So they want me to agree willingly?" he said. "Yes," Sayol replied. Elias looked at the council member directly. Even though they spoke different languages, he held eye contact, letting his calm speak for him. "Ask them something for me," he said to Sayol. She nodded. "Ask them if they believe I am already dead." Sayol hesitated but repeated the question in their language. The council member paused, surprised. The other aliens exchanged glances before responding. Sayol turned back to Elias. "They say, not dead, but survival probability low." He nodded. "Then I'm still alive," he said quietly. "And alive means I get a say in what happens to me." The room became silent. Even without understanding the exact words, the council sensed his tone. "They believe logic guides best decisions," Sayol said softly. "Logic without compassion isn't complete," Elias replied. Sayol translated again. The council member listened, then spoke in a slower tone. Sayol's eyes widened slightly as she heard the response. "They allow you to ask questions," she said. Elias took a breath.
"Good. First question."
"Are there treatments you refused because they are dangerous?" Sayol hesitated, clearly uncomfortable translating that. But she did it anyway. The council member answered after a pause. "Yes," Sayol said quietly. "Experimental procedure exists, but considered too risky." Elias nodded slowly, confirming what he already suspected. "Second question. Has anyone survived with injuries like mine?" Sayol listened again. Her expression became more serious. "No confirmed survival," she translated. Elias felt the weight of that answer, but did not let it show. "Then your safe plan leads to the same result as doing nothing," he said calmly. The council member responded immediately, voice sharper this time. Sayol translated with careful wording. "They say unknown risk may accelerate failure." Elias gave a faint nod. "That's true, but unknown risk is still risk with possibility. Doing nothing has only one ending." The room fell silent again. The council members seemed to consider his words, analyzing them like complex data. Finally, the lead council member spoke again. Sayol translated slowly. "Decision remains unchanged. Transfer to Research Division." Elias felt disappointment, but not surprise. He gave a small nod. "Then I'll cooperate," he said. "But I want Sayel assigned to my care." The council members exchanged quick looks. After a moment, they responded. "They will consider," she translated. Elias smiled faintly. "That's better than no." The council members turned and left the room, their movements quiet but purposeful. The door closed behind them, leaving only Elias and Sayil, with the gentle hum of the machines. Sayel released a slow breath, as if she had been holding it the entire time.
You challenge them, she said softly. I talk, he replied.
They decide if it feels like challenge. She looked at him carefully. You are not angry? Oh, I'm angry, he admitted, but anger without direction just burns energy. She nodded slowly, absorbing his words. After a few moments, she said quietly, You ask for me to stay. Why? Elias looked at her with calm honesty. Because you see me as a person. Her eyes softened. That should be normal, she said. For humans, maybe, he replied gently. But for your people, maybe it's new. She did not argue. Time passed quietly as she prepared him for transfer. She checked the glowing lines under his skin, adjusting settings carefully. Each movement was precise, but there was tenderness in the way she handled him. Sayo, he said after a while. Yes. If the experimental therapy exists, who created it? She hesitated. Research group studying cross-species regeneration, she said quietly. It combines alien technology with adaptive biological response. And they won't try it because it's too risky? Yes. Elias closed his eyes briefly, thinking. Sometimes survival depends on someone willing to try the impossible, he said softly. She did not answer, but he saw something change in her expression. The transfer began soon after. The bed lifted again, moving through corridors that grew colder and more mechanical. The research division looked different from the medical ward. The walls were sharper, the lighting brighter. Equipment filled every corner. Elias felt more like an object here. Several alien researchers waited as he arrived. Their eyes moved quickly over him, analyzing every detail. He kept his breathing steady, refusing to let himself feel small. Sayal stayed beside him, translating when needed. She maintained her calm professionalism, but Elias could sense her discomfort. One researcher spoke rapidly, pointing to several displays. Sayal listened and then translated. They want continuous brain monitoring. They believe your neural activity shows adaptation. Elias said quietly. She lowered her gaze. Maybe adaptation to survive, she replied. He looked at her, surprised by the hope in her voice. The researchers began attaching additional sensors. Elias felt slight pressure but no pain. He focused on breathing slowly, conserving energy. As time passed, he noticed something strange. Even as his body felt weaker, his thoughts felt clearer. Memories came easily. Ideas connected faster. He turned to Sayal. Do you ever question your system? He asked. She hesitated. I did not before, she admitted. Logic always guided decisions. And now? She looked at him, eyes thoughtful. Now I see logic without empathy creates emptiness. Elias smiled faintly. Humans struggle with balance too. We feel too much sometimes. Feeling too much sounds alive, she said softly. Hours passed with tests and monitoring. Eventually, the researchers stepped back, discussing results among themselves. Sale watched them, tension growing again. What is it? Elias asked. They discuss anomaly, she said. Your brain creating new pathways. Good anomaly or bad anomaly? He asked. She almost smiled. They do not know. He chuckled weakly. Story of my life. Suddenly, alarms sounded softly through the chamber. The researchers froze, studying new data appearing on their displays. Sale's eyes widened as she read the readings. She moved closer to Elias quickly. What's happening? He asked. "Your condition unstable," she said quietly. "Energy levels dropping faster than predicted." He felt it too, a deep fatigue spreading through him like cold water. The researchers began issuing rapid commands. Machines adjusted around him, sending waves of energy through his body. The humming grew louder. Sael stayed close, her hand hovering near his. "Stay with me," she said softly. "I'm not going anywhere yet," he replied weakly. She leaned closer. "If condition continues, they will stop active monitoring and switch to passive observation," she whispered. "What does that mean?" he asked. "They prepare for end stage," she said quietly. Elias swallowed. The moment felt heavier than anything before, but instead of fear, he felt clarity. "Sail," he said softly. "If we're going to try something, we don't have much time, do we?" Her eyes filled with conflict. "No," she whispered. He held her gaze. Then you need to decide what kind of nurse you want to be. The one who follows rules, or the one who gives someone a chance?" She closed her eyes briefly, overwhelmed by the weight of the decision. The machines continued their steady hum as his vital signs flickered between stability and decline. Around them, researchers argued quietly, unaware of the deeper choice forming between the human and the alien nurse. Sayal opened her eyes again. There was fear there, but also determination stronger than before. She looked at Elias and nodded once, slowly, as if she had just crossed an invisible line. And in that silent moment, both of them understood that the next step would change everything. The machines around Elias continued their steady humming, but the rhythm felt different now. It was faster, more urgent, as if the entire room knew that time was running out. The glowing lines under his skin flickered unevenly, rising and falling like a weak signal trying to hold on. His breathing stayed calm, but every inhale required more effort than before. Sile stood beside him, watching the monitors closely. The decision she had made moments earlier weighed heavily on her, but her movements became more certain. She adjusted one of the floating displays, hiding part of the data behind a different interface, so the nearby researchers could not immediately notice the changes. Elias noticed her actions and understood without words. He kept his face calm, pretending to focus only on breathing while she worked. Around them, the researchers spoke quickly in their own language. Their attention was divided between several displays, trying to understand the sudden drop in Elias's energy levels. None of them realized that Sail was preparing something else. She leaned closer to him, her voice barely louder than a breath. "Experimental therapy requires relocation," she whispered. "Can you do it?" he asked quietly. She hesitated for only a second. "Yes, but one start." No turning back. Elias nodded slowly. "Then let's stop waiting." Her eyes met his. He saw fear there, but also determination stronger than anything he had seen before. She moved away briefly, accessing another control panel. With careful precision, she altered the medical schedule displayed on the main screen, making it appear as though Elias required immediate transfer to another chamber for advanced scanning. One of the researchers noticed the change and spoke sharply. Sail responded calmly, explaining that new readings suggested a neural spike that required specialized equipment. Her tone was professional, confident, leaving no room for doubt. After a short discussion, the researchers agreed. The bed beneath Elias lifted smoothly, guided by invisible force toward a side corridor. As they moved away from the main research area, Elias felt a strange mixture of hope and uncertainty. He knew they were stepping into unknown territory, but for the first time since waking, he felt like he was actively fighting for survival instead of waiting for decisions made by others. The corridor grew quieter as they moved deeper into the station. The lighting dimmed slightly, and fewer aliens walked past. Sail guided the bed toward a sealed chamber at the end of the hall. She placed her hand against a glowing panel, and the door opened slowly. Inside, the room looked different from the others. The equipment was older, less polished, but more complex. Rings of metallic structures surrounded a central platform, and several cables hung suspended in the air like frozen streams. "This is where experimental group worked," she said softly. "After failures, project closed." Failures doesn't sound encouraging. She looked at him seriously. "Failure teaches more than success sometimes." He smiled faintly, spoken like a human. She gave a small, nervous laugh. The bed lowered onto the central platform. Sayel moved quickly, activating systems that had not been used in a long time. Lights flickered to life, and the machines hummed with deep energy. "What happens now?" Elias asked. She took a breath. "Therapy will combine your human adaptability with regenerative field. It forces body to choose survival path." "Oh?" he asked gently. "Or body cannot adapt," she said honestly. Elias nodded. He appreciated her honesty. "Then let's give it something to work with." She began attaching additional connectors to his arms and chest. Each touch was careful, almost protective. As she worked, alarms sounded faintly in the distance, suggesting that the researchers had noticed the change in location. "They will come soon," she said quietly. "Then we better start before they arrive," he replied. She activated the main console. The rings around the platform began to rotate slowly, emitting soft pulses of light. Energy flowed through the cables into the connectors attached to Elias's body. At first he felt only warmth, similar to earlier treatments. Then the sensation intensified. Heat spread through his muscles, followed by sharp waves of cold. His breathing became uneven. "Stay focused," Sale said gently. "Your brain guides adaptation." Elias closed his eyes, concentrating on slow breaths. He imagined his body fighting, adapting, refusing to give up. Memories flashed through his mind. Training exercises, laughter with teammates, the moment he chose to stay behind during the battle. Each memory reminded him why he wanted to live. The energy increased. The glowing lines under his skin brightened, pulsing rapidly. The machines reacted, adjusting automatically. Sale watched every reading carefully, her hands moving quickly across the controls. Fear rose inside her as the data shifted wildly, but she forced herself to stay calm. Suddenly, the door opened behind her. Several council members entered, accompanied by researchers. Their voices rose in alarm as they saw the active experiment. Sale turned to face them, standing between them and Elias. She spoke firmly, explaining that the therapy had already begun and could not be safely stopped. The lead council member responded sharply, clearly disapproving. The room filled with tension. Elias's body reacted strongly to the energy field. His muscles tightened, and his heartbeat accelerated. He felt as though every cell was waking up, fighting to reorganize itself. "Sale," he said weakly. "I am here," she replied immediately, returning her attention to him despite the voices behind her. The council members argued among themselves. Some demanded shutdown. Others wanted to observe the results. Finally, they stepped back, allowing the process to continue under strict supervision. Minutes felt like hours. Elias's vision blurred and sharpened repeatedly. He focused on Sale's voice, letting it guide him through the waves of sensation. "You are doing well," she said softly. "Body, responding." He smiled faintly, despite the strain. "Told you humans are stubborn." She almost laughed through her anxiety. Gradually, the readings began to stabilize. The chaotic patterns shifted into steady rhythms. The glowing lines beneath his skin changed color slightly, becoming softer, less erratic. The energy field slowed, the rotating rings stopped. Silence filled the chamber. Sayal stared at the monitors, unable to believe what she was seeing. Elias's vital signs were no longer dropping. His energy levels were rising slowly, steadily. He is stabilizing, one researcher said in surprise. The council members moved closer, studying the data. Their expressions shifted from disapproval to astonishment. Elias opened his eyes slowly. The exhaustion remained, but the heavy weight inside his chest felt lighter. He took a deeper breath than he had managed in days. "Did it work?" he asked quietly. Sail looked at him, tears forming in her eyes again. "Yes," she whispered. "You are not dying now." Relief washed through him. He closed his eyes briefly, letting the words settle. The council members began discussing rapidly, their voices filled with excitement. The successful integration between human biology and alien technology challenged everything they believed about risk and logic. Zale stepped closer to Elias, her hand resting gently on his arm. "You changed their thinking," she said softly. "Bad." He shook his head slightly. "We changed it," he corrected. Over the next hours, the machines continued monitoring his recovery. His strength returned slowly, but the improvement was clear. The researchers watched with fascination, no longer seeing him as only a subject, but as proof of something new. Later, when the chamber grew quiet again, Elias looked toward the ceiling, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat.
"You saved me," he said to Sael. She shook her head.
"You chose to fight," he smiled. "Maybe both are needed." She nodded, understanding. Outside the chamber, the council began discussing new policies, reconsidering how emotion and logic could work together. The success of the therapy had changed more than one life. It had opened a path toward cooperation between species. Elias turned his head slightly, watching Sael as she adjusted the machines one last time. "What happens now?" he asked. She met his gaze with a gentle smile. "Now, you recover, and maybe teach my people about hope." He breathed deeply, feeling alive in a way he had not expected. Beyond the walls of the station, the stars waited, full of new possibilities. And for the first time since waking, Elias allowed himself to believe that survival was not just chance. It was the beginning of something greater, something that would change both his future and the future of those who had once seen him only as a mystery.